Welcome to the second of these three videos for worship for the 28th of February 2021.
Good morning. Today's reading is taken from Mark's Gospel. Jesus then began to teach the disciples that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, but Peter took him to one side and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet lose his soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." I suppose I'd like to ask 4 questions in this talk today. The first is, are we quite certain that Jesus said this? The second is, what did he mean about taking up your cross? What kind of things did he have in mind when he said it? The third is, what's the motivation for people to do it? Why should we take up our cross and follow him? And the fourth is, if we try and do that, how will it work out in our lives and how will we get through the difficulties that it entails? The first question. There is the rise of modern scholarship which says we're not really quite sure where the gospel writers got their information about Jesus. How do we know that this saying was not simply invented by the early church in the light of what had happened at the crucifixion and placed onto the mouth of Jesus by later generations? Well, there are various academic answers to that, and I hope you'll bear with me briefly as I do them. Source criticism talks about where the gospel writers got their information from. Matthew and Luke both had Mark's gospel as one of their sources of information. They both also had some other material which is generally called Q, a collection of the sayings of Jesus. In Matthew's gospel there are 2 sayings about taking up your cross and following Jesus, and in Luke's gospel there are 2 as well. And in both cases, one of them comes at this incident and clearly comes because they got it from Mark. And in the other cases, they clearly both got them from the same source because of the way that the sources match up. It therefore follows that Mark did not invent this saying, and neither did the person who put together the document called Q, the sayings of Jesus. The record of Jesus saying, "Take up your cross," must go back earlier than either of those 2 sources. There is a thing called redaction criticism, which is about what the authors did. It wasn't Mark's invention or Matthew's invention or Luke's invention that Jesus said these words. And there is a branch of scholarship which is called form criticism, which looks at the way that the forms of sayings might have been transmitted from early times. "Take up your cross and follow me." is in the form of something very simple and easy to remember, and therefore not likely to have been changed over the years between it being said and it being recorded. All of those things point to the idea that this saying goes back, if not actually to this incident, at least very close, and to the lips of Jesus himself. What does it mean to take up your cross and follow Jesus? What might it mean in our generation? Well, in the New English Bible, in the Good News Bible, there is a picture of Jesus with his cross, and then a whole load of other people, each carrying their own crosses, following him. But Jesus didn't mean it literally, did he? He didn't mean that people were literally going to be crucified on his account. Well, maybe some of them were. After all, as the film The Life of Brian points out, crucifixion was not an unknown thing in New Testament times, and actually it was an accepted way of meeting one's end for criminals in the Roman Empire. But of course, there are inside ways of being crucified which are smaller. When we face persecution from other people because of the fact that they don't like what we're doing, when we face discrimination because of the fact that people do not like the way that our good conduct shows their bad conduct up in a bad light, and when we face tensions inside ourselves because we know that we need to stop and do something for Jesus' sake, when really we'd much rather be selfish and put it away. Those are the kinds of things that Jesus is talking about in this Bible passage. What are the motives for taking up our cross and following Jesus? Well, it's a case, isn't it, of looking to the future. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me and the gospel will save it. In the long term, do you want to lose your life, or do you want to save it? Wouldn't you want to do something which is best for the long term? After all, when you make pension contributions, it isn't that you want to get rid of money for the moment, but rather it's because you want to make sure that the future is going to be all right when you have come to the end of your working life, or alternatively for your dependents if you're going to leave them behind. When you put the seatbelt on in the car, it's not because it's a comfortable thing to do, rather it's for the sake of a better outcome if there should be an accident, heaven forbid. Looking to the long term, doesn't it make sense to try and save our life rather than lose it? After all, as Jesus says, if you lose the whole principle of your being, your soul, how can you get it back in the future? If you've sold yourself down the river, how can you redeem yourself? Obviously you can't do that. If you want to keep your life and have it mean something, then you need to nail your colours to the mast of something which is going to work. How does it work out if we do try to follow Jesus? Well, Jesus himself promised that he who stands firm to the end will be saved. That's in the passage where he was teaching the apostles just before he was arrested and put on trial. It comes in Mark 13 and the other two Gospels in the corresponding place. Jesus himself said that we would have supernatural help from God if we chose to try and follow him. Later generations of Christians discovered the same thing, and in the letters of Paul and in other letters it says that if we fix our eyes on Jesus, then we will get the glory and the crown in due course. It says that if we cast our cares on Jesus, then we will find his comfort and his ability to help us in our time of need. That's in 1 Peter. It says that if we give ourselves to following Jesus, then he will give himself, his Holy Spirit to us, and he will put a part of himself in us to give us the strength to follow him. That's in the letters of St. Paul. In all these different ways, people have discovered that when we do try to take seriously this idea of giving up our own preferences and instead following Jesus and doing things his way rather than our own, we find his power to help us in our time of need. Would you rather get by on the moment but have Jesus ashamed of you at the end? Or would you rather risk a little bit of approbation nowadays for the sake of getting Jesus' eternal approval when it comes to the end? Well, I know what I'd prefer. If anyone is ashamed of me, says Jesus, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him at the end. The generation is still adulterous and sinful. In fact, it might even be more so nowadays than it was in those days. But won't you take up Jesus' invitation of doing the right thing? Take up your cross and follow him. You will find that although it's initially difficult, it pays a rich reward. The hymn, O Jesus, I have promised to serve thee to the end, of course, is precisely about this topic, that when we make a commitment to Jesus, he makes a commitment to us as well. And despite the fact the way may be tough, we can find in him the strength to get through and the promise of seeing him in glory. Please join us as we sing.
O Jesus, I have promised to serve thee to the end. Be thou forever near me, my Master and my friend. I shall not fear the battle if thou art by my side. No wander from the pathway if thou wilt be my guide. O Jesus, thou hast promised to all who follow thee, that where thou art in glory, there shall thy servant be. And Jesus, I have promised to serve thee to the end. Oh, give me grace to follow my Master and my friend. Oh, let me see thy footmarks, and in them plant mine own. My hope to follow duly is in thy strength alone. Oh, guide me, call me, draw me, uphold me to the end. And then in heaven receive me, my sister and my friend.
That's the end of the second of these videos, and to follow us into the next one, again, please just choose it or select it or click on it when it appears on the screen after I finish speaking. And we'll see you in the third one.